You do realize if this clause gets cut, they can walk anytime, no penalties, I said, holding the pen like a scalpel above the last surviving copy of the agreement that kept our company solvent. Nobody answered. Just shifting chairs and the rhythmic tapping of Becky's nails, acrylic French tips, dumb as bricks, filing away at my soul. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't just fighting to protect a document. I was the last sandbag holding back a flood of corporate stupidity. And the water was rising fast. The agreement wasn't just some Word doc buried on a shared drive. It was the agreement, the master template, the Mona Lisa of legal frameworks for enterprise retainers. I'd stitched it together clause by clause over 5 brutal months of conference calls, compliance audits, red-eye edits, and enough caffeine to euthanize a lab rat. The client, a global logistics giant, had lawyers who fed on blood and loopholes. I made sure they got nothing but air. Every word in that document was there on purpose. Nothing filler, nothing flabby. From indemnity caps to force majeure gymnastics, I built that thing to survive mergers, bankruptcies, and seasonal psychosis from their procurement team. Hell, legal once joked it read like a novel with an attitude problem. So yeah, I copyrighted it. Just a little copyright my name. All rights reserved tucked in the footer. Out of spite, maybe. Or maybe because I knew one day someone would try to steal it. Speaking of stealing, 97% of you are listening to stories like this without hitting the subscribe button. Wild, like using someone's Netflix and not even pretending to say thank you. Don't be that guy. A simple tap on subscribe genuinely helps the team here keep dragging these corporate skeletons out of their closets. Anyway, nobody really thanked me for the contract. It was just there, humming in the background like an HVAC you don't notice until it breaks. People got bonuses because of that agreement. Promotions. Hell, the VP of sales took his wife to Bora Bora on the commission alone. Meanwhile, I was told not to expense a $14 lunch because we need to tighten belts this quarter. But I kept maintaining it, updating clauses when regulations changed, adding writer language when the client expanded to Southeast Asia. There were entire Sunday afternoons I spent sweating over 2 words, timely versus reasonable. Because that difference? That's what saved us from arbitration when their vendor lost a shipment of jet engines. And through all that, every eye roll from legal, every "oh, she's just a contract person" snub from product, I stayed. Not out of loyalty. That dried up somewhere between the fourth reorg and the annual "no raises this year" email. I stayed because that agreement was mine. It had my fingerprints. My fingerprints had calluses, and I wasn't gonna let some LinkedIn influencer with a fake smile and a real estate side hustle butcher it in the name of streamlining operations. I used to joke that if the company ever tried to reuse my work without me, they'd regret it. But the joke stopped being funny when I noticed they were getting sloppy. Casual edits without tracking. Client red lines disappearing between versions. And worst of all, a new folder on the shared drive labeled Standard Agreement Editable. Editable, like it was some grocery list. I should have seen the storm coming. But I didn't, not yet. That came later when she walked in. Efficiency surgeon with the laser smile and the soft tone of someone who thought due diligence was a personality flaw. She didn't ask where the contract came from. She didn't care. She just wanted it copied and reused. Copy-paste, she said. It's not rocket science. No, it was worse. It was office politics. And office politics, unlike rocket science, actively punishes logic. She arrived with the sound of heels that meant business, expensive ones, sharp enough to pop egos and cut severance packages in half. Veronica Shaw, freshly imported from a fintech startup that collapsed faster than a cheap tent in a hurricane, strutted into our Monday ops meeting like she'd been crowned queen of compliance via LinkedIn endorsements and 2 blog posts about workplace agility. This place moves like molasses in church. She laughed, dropping her Gucci tote on the conference table like she was marking territory. My job is to clear the sludge, starting with all this bureaucratic lag. That was her term for legal process. You know, contracts, risk assessment, indemnity, liability. Minor details like don't get sued. To her, they were friction points. And people like me, clipboard bureaucrats. She called me that to my face. In front of the room, relax, she added, flashing a grin like she was joking. We need less red tape, more rocket fuel. I mean, come on. Half the time we're triple-checking commas while clients lose interest. I didn't flinch. That's rule number 1 in corporate survival, never flinch, but I felt it. That little sting behind the eyes when someone kicks your decade of work into the recycling bin with a giggle. She opened the agreement folder like it was a leftover casserole, skimmed the first page, and dropped it with a sigh. Jesus, this thing's a novel. Can't we just use the old one? I said. Careful not to grit my teeth, that is the old one. It's also the only version that includes indemnity lock-ins, service escalation ladders, and territorial protections that kept us out of 6 lawsuits. She blinked, bored. Yeah, but do we need all that? Feels bloated. Streamline it. Let's keep what matters and ditch the fluff. The fluff. She meant the clauses I wrote when our client merged with a shipping firm in Panama and tried to backdoor us into covering $400K in customs penalties. The ones that kept our SLA windows tight but fair. The ones she didn't even read. I glanced around the room, nobody spoke. Legal stared at their laptops like they were watching a dog walk on its hind legs. Sales looked relieved because they thought simpler meant faster deals. And the CEO, he was on mute because of course he zoomed in from Aspen, probably Googling what is indemnity. Veronica leaned in, all condescension and citrus perfume. Look, I get that you're thorough, that's great, but we don't have time for deep dives. Just take the last version, strip out the legalese, and get it back to me by Friday. I've got a pitch to prep, clipboard bureaucrat. She hadn't said it again, but it echoed louder the second time. I walked out of that room like I was underwater. Every fiber in me screamed to hit reply all with a 9-page breakdown of why this was a ticking time bomb, but rule number 2 in corporate survival: don't scream, document. I started printing copies, backing up change logs, creating my own paper trail. I highlighted every clause she flagged for deletion and tucked them into a folder on my desktop titled Obituary Draft Contract Edition. Was I overreacting? Maybe, but the gut don't lie, and mine was curling like spoiled milk. And yet I didn't push harder, not then. I played it safe, because I still believed someone above her would stop this madness. That reason would override ego. But reason doesn't close quarterly. Ego does, and ego was about to cost us everything. 3 days later, we were back in the same conference room, same flickering light panel overhead, same stale cinnamon muffins from the We Value You tray. This time, Veronica brought slides. Big ones, color-coded like a children's book for executives. She titled the deck contract Optimization Less is More. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She clicked to a slide labeled Client Priorities, Speed and Clarity. Let's trim the fat, she said, flipping her glossy hair back like she just solved climate change. They don't care about subsections. Want clean terms, fast approvals. We're giving them homework instead of handshakes. I cleared my throat. They specifically asked for detailed termination windows. Remember Q3 last year when they almost pulled out over an SLA gap? Right, she nodded vaguely, but that was different. How exactly? I asked. Her smile thinned, because now I'm here and they trust us. We don't need all this defensive language. If we look paranoid, they'll act paranoid. Veronica. I tried one more time. My voice calm but tight like a rubber band before the snap. If we remove indemnity protections, we're on the hook for vendor failures. If we skip the renewal auto triggers, they can walk with 30 days notice. If we gut the territory clause, they can bring in a subcontractor and we'll have zero recourse. This isn't legal bloat, it's a parachute. She waved her hand like she was shooing a fly off her peloton. It's not rocket science. Just plug it in. Same name, new vibe, trust me. The room went quiet, but not supportive, quiet, compliance quiet. The kind where nobody wants to be near the blast zone. I looked at Jack from legal. He shrugged like his spine had been removed. Veronica turned back to the screen. We'll send the new version out tomorrow. Quick, easy, elegant, sure, like a noose tied with ribbon. I stared down at my printed copy, full of red ink and sticky notes, and felt that sick thud of knowing. This was going to blow up. I could see the chain reaction 5 moves ahead. The client would read it, panic, forward it to legal. Legal would escalate, and by the time leadership noticed, the bridge would already be ash. I went back to my desk with my pulse ringing in my ears and started copying everything to my personal drive. Every clause I'd written, every change log, every client note that said we appreciate the clarity here. Then I opened the master file and added one small thing. Copyright my name, all rights reserved. Use licensed under employment contract until termination. Right there in the footer. Legal had ignored it before. HR had chuckled when I asked about it years ago. But it was real. It was filed. It had a timestamp and a hard copy at my apartment in a fireproof box next to my birth certificate and the title to my car. If they were going to burn my work, I was going to roast marshmallows on the ashes. By Friday, the streamlined agreement was sent. No indemnity clause, no escalation ladder, no region lock. A glossy, gutless PDF that looked like a startup pitch deck and read like wishful thinking. I wasn't on the email thread to the client, but I saw the read receipt land. Then nothing. No thank you, no reply. Just that cold, empty space that feels like a wave pulling back before it crashes. The reply came 48 hours later. 3 lines. No greeting, no emoji, no corporate fluff, just clinical precision with the heat of a scalpel. We've reviewed the proposed contract. There is significant regression in clarity and legal cohesion. We are reevaluating our position with your firm and will be pausing all negotiations until further notice. That was it. It hit like a death certificate dropped on a birthday cake. Veronica tried to play it off in the Monday stand-up, spinning phrases like normal client posturing and strategic negotiation friction. But the color in her cheeks told the truth. She knew, the rest of the team just didn't want to admit it yet. On Tuesday, I got a message from Darren Chen, senior liaison on the client side. We'd worked together for 7 years. He once called the agreement I built the legal equivalent of Kevlar. His message was just a screenshot. The old contract's clause on service obligation timelines, highlighted in yellow, followed by the new version, 2 lines, vague enough to be printed on a napkin. Underneath, he'd typed, "Did you approve this version? Not like you." God, that hurt. I wanted to reply. I wanted to tell him everything, that I had fought, that I'd been steamrolled by a human buzzword machine in heels. I'd watched the agreement get gutted like a deer in hunting season. But I couldn't, I was officially off the project. Veronica had made sure of that. Too emotionally attached to the legacy model, she said. HR had looped in to confirm it. Any direct communication with the client was grounds for disciplinary review. I stared at the message for 10 full minutes. Then I deleted it and opened my personal backup again. Scrolled through the sections I'd spent years refining. Termination traps, protection ladders, survivability clauses. A decade of client psychology and legal choreography folded into 48 pages. That night, I poured a glass of whiskey and sat on my apartment floor, lit by the soft blue glow of my monitor. I remembered a conversation from 5 years ago, late night, me and Carla from legal eating leftover pad thai in the war room after a renegotiation marathon. She'd flipped through the contract and laughed. "This thing reads like a patent," she said. "If we ever lose you, we're screwed. No one else here writes like this." I thought she was exaggerating. Back then, I still believed in institutional memory. Turns out the institution had amnesia. By Thursday, silence turned into whispers. Marketing put a campaign on hold. Finance asked if anyone had seen updated projections. Sales lost a deal they were certain was already won. On Friday morning, email hit the entire C-suite. Termination notice effective immediately. The client had pulled the plug. No room for renegotiation. No wiggle. It wasn't just a client. It was the client, $10 million a year, our flagship logo, our proof of competency. And now it was gone. Veronica didn't come in that day. She worked remote. I walked into the break room and found Jack from legal holding a copy of the new contract, face pale like a funeral candle. He looked at me defeated. "They're saying it's everyone's fault," he muttered. "No single point of failure." I didn't say a word, just nodded, grabbed my coffee, and went back to my desk. Because under the fury boiling in my gut, there was something colder, grim satisfaction. They'd thrown out the parachute midair. Now they could enjoy the fall. They held the all-hands at 10 o'clock a.m. sharp. No coffee, no donuts, no smiles, just tension thick enough to hang bodies from. We were summoned to the sixth-floor auditorium, the one with the sad, flickering projector and chairs that creaked like they knew what was coming. Veronica stood on stage with the CEO beside her, both pretending they hadn't just flushed our flagship account like a goldfish funeral. The CEO opened with a classic: "We're navigating a transitional period." That's corporate for "We lit the house on fire but found a way to blame the wallpaper." Then came the PowerPoint. Red bar graphs, churn metrics, legal risk slides with bullet points like contract irregularities and failure of internal communication protocols. They might as well have slapped my photo up there with a dartboard overlay. The moment came 5 slides in. Veronica cleared her throat and said, "As we dissect how we got here, it's important to recognize breakdowns in escalation chains. Certain individuals, while technically experienced, failed to proactively raise risks in a timely, executive-facing manner." Translation: I didn't send my concerns to her boss's boss with a neon subject line reading "Your VP is flamethrowing our biggest deal." Never mind the documented objections I'd made. Never mind the 3 flagged emails I had CC'd to legal, procurement, and even the damn Slack thread where I warned, "This stripped version won't hold up. See indemnity clause history." Jack from legal had seen them. He looked down at his shoes. The CFO wouldn't even meet my eyes. Then HR walked up. "Julie." Clipboard, tight bun, voice like a kindergarten teacher reading off a detention slip. "As of today, we are terminating your employment for procedural negligence and failure to properly escalate critical concerns. You will be escorted from the premises immediately." I laughed. Not a cackle, not hysterical. Just a dry, exhausted chuckle that came from somewhere far deeper than my lungs. Julie flinched like she'd been slapped. I stood up. No arguments, no tears, just silence. Picked up my purse, my sweater, and one thing more, a black USB drive shaped like a fountain pen. I'd had it clipped inside my notebook for months. No one noticed. They were too busy swallowing buzzwords and passing blame like a hot potato. The entire room watched me walk out like I was a ghost being exorcised. At the elevator, I paused. My badge still worked. That would change in 10 minutes. I stepped in, let the doors close, then pulled out my phone. One contact. No last name, just a saved number and a single letter, M. The call rang once. "Ready?" I asked. The voice on the other end didn't say hello, it just replied, always. The letter went out on Monday morning, certified and notarized, printed on thick cream paper that smelled like money and war. My lawyer, Marcus, the voice behind Ready, had spent the weekend polishing it like a sword. 3 pages. No fluff, no emotion. Just scalpel-precise language that walked the board through their own stupidity like toddlers on a leash. Unauthorized reuse and dissemination of copyrighted contractual framework authored by my full name. It opened with facts. The agreement, filed under my name, copyrighted in accordance with U.S. Copyright Office Protocol 3 years prior, had been used with an implied license only during the tenure of my employment. That license, by its own stated terms, expired the moment I was terminated. And yet the document, or a derivative of it, had been sent, reused, and weaponized after that date, with my name scrubbed, of course. But IP law doesn't care about your copier settings. They were now in retroactive breach. Marcus laid it out like an autopsy report, every clause that was lifted verbatim, every section modified without relicense. He even attached metadata screenshots from the original file, timestamps, authorship fingerprints. It was airtight, ironclad, bulletproof, and it scared the hell out of me. I sat in my kitchen, coffee gone cold, watching the tracking status flip to delivered signed by TH. That was Tom Henson, the company's general counsel, a man who once told me over happy hour, nobody reads the footer. Guess what, Tom? I did, and now it mattered. Marcus texted a few minutes later. Sent, they'll read it, give it 24 hours for internal panic, 72 for outside counsel. P.S. The ending was fun, he wasn't kidding. The final paragraph, smooth as bourbon, read, given the unauthorized use and ongoing risk of further infringement, formally request immediate cessation of all derivative usage and distribution. Additionally, we are evaluating damages under applicable law. Please refer to U.S. Copyright Code Title 17, Sections 101, 106, and 501. Then came the closer, govern yourselves accordingly. It hit like a guillotine in slow motion. But the moment it was out, and the paper trail had landed in the boardroom like a lit fuse, adrenaline curdled into something else, doubt. Would they ignore it, pretend it was noise? Were they already lawyering up to bury it in countersuits and corporate delays? I knew how these games worked. Drag it out long enough and the little guy bleeds out from stress and legal fees. Only I wasn't the little guy anymore, not this time. This time I had the receipts, the copyright, the USB, the backups, the intent, and most importantly, the rival. Still, that night, lying in bed, I didn't sleep, not really. I stared at the ceiling and rehearsed the worst-case scenarios, boardroom whispers, NDA, retaliation, but beneath all that, a low, slow flame. The first flicker of triumph crawling up from my stomach like heat from a coming fire. Let them panic. Let them call meetings and lawyers and PR reps, because they were playing chess with half a board, and I still had my queen. By Wednesday afternoon, my inbox, one they'd long forgotten existed, started humming like a Vegas slot machine stuck on panic mode. Not from the company directly, of course. They were smarter than that, but there were signals, subtle shifts in the air. A junior associate from their go-to-law firm accidentally connected with me on LinkedIn. A recruiter I hadn't heard from in years sent me a message that read, "Would love to chat." Nothing specific, just catching up, please. I wasn't born in a cubicle. Then came the more obvious signs. A colleague forwarded me a screen cap of a Slack thread from the compliance channel, now mysteriously renamed Urgent Review. Someone had posted, "Does anyone have a clean version of the agreement template that isn't tied to the previous IP?" The answer? No. No, they did not, because the agreement wasn't some cookie-cutter template you could slap lipstick on and call new. It was layered. Referenced internal policy documents, contained proprietary logic flows for onboarding, escalation, renewal triggers. Without that IP, they didn't just lose the client, they lost the framework. Couldn't tweak it, couldn't build on it. Any variation now was still derivative work. And I had the copyright to all of it. Marcus confirmed the panic was real. Their internal counsel had looped in two outside firms, one with a specialty in intellectual property arbitration. Told me their C-suite had been in meetings back-to-back since the letter landed. They're scrambling, he said, like toddlers with scissors. That's when the real offer came in. An email from an independent mediator, someone I'd never heard of but whose name showed up on court records as a private negotiator for corporate settlements. The message was almost soothing in its tone, sugar-coated legalese. While no party is claiming wrongdoing, the board would be interested in a confidential resolution that protects mutual interests and avoids unnecessary disruption. Translation. We admit nothing, but how much will it take to make you disappear? The number they offered was laughable. Not insulting, just limp. A few months' salary and an NDA tight enough to mummify my future. I forwarded it to Marcus with one word, decline. He sent back a fire emoji and a gif of a queen snapping a pawn's neck. Because at this point, I wasn't just cleaning up the mess they made. I was hunting. The offer confirmed something important. They knew they'd screwed up. Knew it legally, structurally, existentially. That if I pressed this, I wouldn't just walk away with a check. I could crack their whole pipeline. Because what they didn't grasp still, even now, was that this wasn't just about one client. That agreement had become the template for their enterprise deals. Every version they'd spun off since. Tainted, tied, traceable, so I started lining things up. My copies, my version history, dates, timestamps, email chains. Marcus pulled in an IP forensic specialist who'd worked cases against pharma giants. I booked a hotel suite downtown with a view of the courthouse and wrote out timelines in black Sharpie across the mirror like it was a crime scene wall. They thought they could clean up with a handshake and a soft bribe. They didn't realize I'd had years to plan this moment. I didn't want their hush money. I wanted the boardroom to bleed. It took exactly 2 emails and 1 midnight phone call to get a meeting on the books. Not with some junior analyst or legal intern, they sent their EVP of strategy. That's how hungry they were. The rival firm had been circling my ex-client for years, sniffing at the edges, throwing out lowball proposals and free consultations like they were tossing chum into shark water. But they could never land the bite. Not with the agreement I'd built in place. My old company's moat was legal architecture, and I was the architect. So when I reached out with a simple offer, I hold the exclusive rights to the original contract framework that governed client name. It is no longer in use. Let me know if you'd like to talk. It responded in less than 6 minutes. We met at a private suite overlooking the river. No corporate HQ, no boardroom, just leather chairs, glass walls, and an air that smelled like money and old secrets. The EVP listened silently as I walked them through the bones of the framework. Modular clauses, defense-grade escalation terms, the renewals ladder that trapped the client in 12-month increments without ever triggering red flags. I showed them how it wasn't just a contract, it was infrastructure. Then I slid the offer across the table. $250,000 flat, exclusive license, no reuse rights, no resale. One client, one shot. He didn't blink. We'll wire it by noon, he said, standing. Our sales team will start the pitch tomorrow. This is surgical. Then he paused. I have to ask, why now? I sipped my water slow. Because I'm done protecting people who don't know what they have until it's gone. He nodded like a man who'd stepped over enough bodies to understand. By the next morning, the wire hit. And just like that, my work was back in play. Not gutted, not ghost-written by consultants. Used verbatim. The sales team at the rival firm dropped it like a bomb during their opening volley. Same client, same pain points. But this time, it came bearing the very framework the client had once called the reason we sleep at night. And it worked. The client responded within 48 hours, set a meeting, said they were open to exploring alternatives, which is corporate speak for they're done pretending. I got the news via text from Marcus. They bit. Same contract. No red lines. Your old company just lost their lifeline. Want me to invoice them now or after the press release? I didn't respond right away. I was standing barefoot on my balcony, pen in hand, signing the final license document while the sun dipped behind the skyline. A bottle of Veuve clinked next to me, half empty and half warm because I'd popped it alone. No toast, no crowd, just the wind and the paper and the ink. Right below my signature, the line was bold and clear, copyright, retained by author. All rights reserved. I smiled for the first time in months. Not because I'd won, because I was just getting started. It hit the newswire at 9:02 a.m., just in time for coffee and combustion. Trident Solutions secures multimillion-dollar contract with global freight titan. Subheading, backed by a custom legal framework developed by industry veterans. No names, no need. Everyone in the industry knew what that meant. My ex-client had signed with their biggest competitor and had done so using the very agreement that once tethered them to my old company like an iron chain. Only this time, the chain had teeth. The press release went viral inside a dozen Slack channels before lunch. LinkedIn lit up with emojis, vague posts about lessons in talent retention, and one knife-in-the-ribs quote reposted by someone in sales. Sometimes you don't know what you've lost until it's weaponized against you. Inside the boardroom, I imagined the silence after that headline must have landed like a nail bomb. Veronica, probably mid-latte, realizing her streamlined contract had not only lost the account, but funded the very team that stole it. Because that $250K they paid me, that was their rebound budget. Their let's win a replacement client cushion. Gone, recycled, spent on ammo used to shoot them in the foot. And then came the last nail. Marcus sent it right on schedule. Certified envelope, signature required. Subject line cold and clinical. Invoice. Unauthorized use of protected IP/formal notice of breach attached were itemized damages, late fees, usage violations, and a highlighted summary of the license terms they had ignored. The tone was icy, professional, just sharp enough to shred reputations without breaking legal decorum. It ended like this: total due upon receipt, $325,000 USD per US. Copyright code Title 17 and confirmed registration #TXU003291871. Signed, Marcus L. Kane, Kane and Voss LLP, and just below the final paragraph, crafted by my full name, all rights reserved. I pictured the CEO reading it, hands shaking slightly over his overpriced smartwatch, trying to calculate which mistake hurt more. Losing the contract, losing the client, or realizing they'd fired the only person who ever truly understood what held the business together. And no, I didn't forgive them. I didn't wish them well. But I did sit on my balcony again that evening, same chair, same view, same glass of champagne, and let the silence wash over me like a benediction. Justice doesn't always look like a courtroom. Sometimes. It looks like a signature they didn't notice, until it cost them everything. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.